Okay, now we're ready. So, this is the fourth episode in our ongoing discussion about the afterlife and grief and romantic relationships. Um, do you have any place you'd like to? By the way, this is all unscripted. We don't even have, talking points or subjects. We do have an audience, and we do interact with them getting questions or suggestions on topics or comments. Do you have any place you'd like to start this off with, Mary Beth?
Yeah, I would just like, first of all, thank you everybody who's listening. Thank you, William. Thank you, Irene and Paul. We love you so much. Um, but I would just like to remind people that because it's unscripted, and I don't know about you, William, but I never listened back to our old, the other ones we've done. So we might repeat things, but
Well, this is true. We might repeat things, but I don't think that the people who the 10 or 12 people who like listening to these really mind that so much because I think I know it's true of me. I know it's probably true of you, Mary Beth. Sometimes we need to hear things multiple times for it to get through, to understand it, and then sometimes later it takes on a different meaning, and you understand it differently. And sometimes it's just difficult to keep this stuff in mind. So I don't really mind. I hope you guys don't either. That sometimes we go over the same stuff several times.
or as a girlfriend, I always tell my friends, listen, I'm going to tell you a story, but let me know if I've already told you this, you can let me know. And my friend said, don't worry, even if you told me, I wouldn't have remembered anyway,
Right there, you go.
which speaks to how memorable the things I talk about are.
I would say that whatsoever.
So I
Uh,
have a little thing. I wrote down a little thing I was eager to talk about.
okay, let's start with that then.
So if you know me, you know I am never eager to speak about details about sex life, like my transdimensional sex life. I just keep those sacred between Paul and me. And that doesn't mean that other people can't if they want to. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, not my, it's not my desire to do that. But I do like hearing other people, like, mediums talk about what sex will be like on the other side. And most of you or many of you know the medium Matt Frazier. I like Matt Frazier. I saw Matt Frazier in person before he had his television show. Once he had his television show, his celebrity grew. And he puts a lot of videos up on YouTube where he shows at least partial readings with people, and I enjoy him. And so recently on YouTube, he had a video and it was really rather lengthy. It wasn't like a little video. It was maybe, I don't know, 18 or 20 minutes long. And it said, what about sex in the afterlife? So I was like, ooh, I want to hear what he has to say about this. And what he said was kind of disappointing to me because he talked about what the way many people talk about it, that when we get over there, we're all energy and we have the two energies merge, and it's far better than anything we had here. And maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but that always is dismaying to me. I don't want Paul and I to be I don't want Paul and me to be just energy. I want to be able to hold him and hug him and kiss him and make love, all the things with a physicality to it, even if it's not the same physics as our bodies here. And after and by the way, after he said that, the whole rest of the video was about other topics. So I thought, what is this, like clickbait? So, and that's nothing against Matt Frazier because in fact, he's coming here this summer where I live on Long Island, and I got a ticket to go see him locally about 10 minutes from where I live. So, I'm a fan. But Matt Frazier is a medium who says, at least I've heard him say in the past, he does not educate himself like he doesn't look at any other information from the afterlife except what he gets in readings himself. And I think there's pros and cons to that. I mean, on one hand, that it's kind of pure, it's just what the medium's getting. But anything the medium gets is always colored through their own sensibilities and their own understanding of things. And I think that when you don't open yourself up to other teachings or whatever, you might miss a lot. I don't know. I'm not a medium, so what do I know? But Anyway, in one of the comments under the video that he posted about sex in the afterlife, somebody had written, yeah, on the other side, there are no trains and tunnels. And I'm like, I want there to be trains and tunnels. And it goes back to what, we've talked about this, William. What I've learned from you and from this journey is that there's so many people saying things as though it were absolutes. And this is the only way it is, and this is the afterlife, and this happens for everybody. And you've helped me understand a different understanding, which is so much nicer, and it makes me relax about all of this, is that the universe contains everything and anything. And so for some people, if they don't want trains and tunnels, they don't have to have trains and tunnels. Personally speaking, I would like that. And so I like the fact that, to broaden it out and to realize that all of these things are possibilities. And it's interesting now. I'm more aware of hearing teachers and mediums and people who are, in the know, experts, say this is the way it is. Because I always want to say, no, there's other ways. It's not only any one way. And it's interesting. I'm a big follower of Abraham, and Abraham always says, if a teacher or an authority or some guru says something, even what we say, even what we bring, the information we bring, if it doesn't resonate with you, then it's not for you. So I think that moving forward when you're educating yourself, I think that's important to understand because there's lots of things I hear that they're not fascinating to me. They're troublesome to me. Nowadays, I'm not so troubled, but in the early years, it would be quite upsetting. So thank you, William.
Well, you're welcome. But I mean, there's plenty of sources. Let's see. Somebody is saying that they don't want to be seen. You won't be seen. And I don't know why you don't have audio. If anybody else is experiencing an audio problem, speak up. So it's not just me saying that. I mean, I'm just a guy on the internet, as I often say. So my information, unlike a medium, which I understand because other mediums, like Carolyn Clapper, which she wouldn't mind me mention her name, I'm sure, uh, do the same thing about remaining pure in their um, information. So it's not colored by these other sources. But I also agree with you is that uh, I think that also can highly limit the kind of information that a particular medium can receive because they don't have a broader base database, so to speak, in their minds that the dead can operate with to get a particular idea or thought through to them. So where I get that information from is number one, the dead themselves. No, not me talking to them. It's from direct voice mediumship, many other forms of mediumship, where the dead are unfiltered in their communication, like through direct voice, Leslie Flint being the primary one, and through the astral projection visitations of extremely credible witnesses and explorers like Jürgen Zive, Emanuel Swedenborg, Darius Wright, Robert Monroe, that assure us that all that physicality is there. I mean, all the physicality of this world plus deeper and better physicality, deeper and better, more real senses and physicality are there for us to experience. And for the people who say there's nothing like that, I mean, there are there are reports of whole places in the afterlife that are just dedicated to sex. so, so like orgy worlds and that type of thing. If it's
Oh,
that big of a deal to you, you can go there. But
okay.
but I agree. It's very important to me because um, number one, that's where Irene and I had some extremely exquisite experiences was through this physicality, and it's very meaningful to me to be able to interact with her that way, physically. I don't want to approach her as an energy field or as an orb or anything like that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist or that for some people that would be better, but I'm not even that particularly interested in something it's hard for me to imagine something better than what Irene and I experienced. Okay, that's the
Right.
first thing. I don't know what the love lives of those people are, but it's hard for me to imagine something being even better. So, uh, so you brought the subject up. So, yeah, along with assuring people that the massive amount of evidence that we have is that yes, there's physical sex in the afterlife. We do have physical bodies. Uh, but I would also like to say is that you can enjoy a sexual relationship with your partner now.
Mhm.
You can enjoy that now, and it just takes when we have posts about it in our group. I think we've addressed it on the website. I'll have to make sure about that, but this just involves what you might originally or initially what you might call just fantasizing about your partner. Okay, so that's like the initial step or the initial thing. You just fantasize about your partner and let that guide you through the process. And it can be extremely fulfilling and it can be very wonderful. And I'm not saying it's as good as or it's different. And in some ways, you can interpret it as a little better in some ways than in other ways. Uh, or not, or of course you could interpret it as not as good. But I'm just here to say that it's in my own experience and the experience of a lot of people in the group, it can be very rewarding and very satisfying, even in this transdimensional state.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that, what you just said, everything you just said. But for some reason, um, people gravitate to an either or scenario. So I was thinking about the Matt Fraser thing with the, we're going to be energy and all that. And he was saying, like, this is not a direct quote, but he was saying, it's going to be like a million times better and it's far, far more than we can. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. But I don't understand why we couldn't have both.
Yeah.
You know, why we couldn't merge our energy and our afterlife version of a solid body together. So that's all I'm saying. I'm more keenly aware of that. There's a lot of information that's here it's one way, but over there it's totally different. And even if it's something that you would desire here or you enjoyed here, ain't going to be the same on the other side. Another example is food. For you'll hear a lot of different so-called authorities or books or whatever just say that you don't need food on the other side. And then some of them, to be fair, do say if you enjoy food here, food and drink, whatever, you can have it there for as long as you need it, but after a while, your desire for it goes away. Maybe that's true. But they also talk about on the other side, like many, many sources talk about the huge libraries that they have that you can learn anything and you can meet with, if for example, if you're a painter, you can meet with Picasso, you could meet with Michelangelo, the greats are all there and accessible and all of that. Uh, and where was I going with that?
Well, you started off with food as an example.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes. So I was thinking about the food thing. And there are people here, not me, by the way, but there are people here who are artists with food, or they're called foodies, and they work hard to make all these fabulous recipes and write cookbooks, and that's their art. Now, why would not be accessible to them as a continuing way of living on the other side? They care about that. It's something that, if I were a foodie, and I heard, gee, on the other side, there's no food or it's going to disappear really quickly, I would be upset because that would be something I was really passionate about. And sometimes, if you want to bring it into the romantic arena. Sometimes you have partners who that's how they bond. They make dinners together, they have parties together, and that's something that's a very loving thing. Or one will prepare food for the other, and that's the way they show love for them. And I don't know, I always felt sorry for the foodie people. Like you're being told that it's not necessary on the other side, but you can have a book, or you can, oh, they'll say that artists paint, people who paint or do other kinds of artistic endeavors, that's okay. So I just think I love what you said, William. It's really changed my whole perspective that everything is possible and that we will gravitate, just like here on Earth. It's very similar. The law of attraction is in place, and we will gravitate to people who we are most like minded with. And we can always visit other people who we are not as like minded with. But generally speaking, we will create our own reality here. We do here, and we will there. That's
Right.
that's what I've come to see as, and it doesn't exclude anybody. Anybody can have whatever they want.
Well, it kind of excludes the people who say you can't have whatever you want, and this is the way it is. But
But then, you know what? I have an answer for that because Abraham says, I heard Abraham say this. I thought that was so clever. I hope I can reiterate it properly. Abraham says that there are people who say there is no evidence for law of attraction. And for those people, they will not experience evidence of law of attraction.
yeah,
So if people, people can have whatever they want, even the people who don't believe that, ultimately they will have what they want.
yeah. The way that I have envisioned that is that I'm quite sure that there's a like a pearly gates area in the afterlife where all the devout Christians exist, and it could very well be there's no reason it can't be. They see everybody else as burning in hell or in some type of purgatory, and that's just what they see. And so they think that they're right, and that it's exclusionary, and that that's the only place where anybody is in actual heaven, or however that works for them. And that's fine. There's to me, it's not. It's almost like uh, people here, especially when they, I don't know, have a certain structure. Uh, they want to be able to know what the truth is, or be able to say what the truth is for everybody. And I just don't understand. I can't understand that perspective of why you would, you know, I don't know, want to be in the position where you can. I'm talking about this now. I actually ran into another source about the whole God soup thing, and their perspective was a lot like Robert Monroe's. Was that in some, they have like different focus levels or whatever that they divvy up the afterlife in, and in some of these, yes, we can experience any uh, desire, anything we want to experience. We can experience that in what he called focus three or whatever. And then he says, and he actually had a really good model that closely matches my own, which is why I consider it good, I guess. It closely matches my own about the nature of these things. That's the same thing, that we gravitate towards communities and people of like mind and of like interests, of like inner self or whatever. But he said that eventually, we decide it's time to move on. And my point being is, how could, unless he's omniscient, how can he possibly know that eventually
Right.
everybody's going to move on to this God soup type of place where we're all interconnected energies, and there's no unique, you know, really relationships, or no real unique individuality. And it always leaves me wondering what kind of psychology gravitates towards that kind of thing. I'm not trying to demean it or anything, but there's got to be a certain psychology where that allows you to gravitate towards that place as being the ultimate goal for everybody, where everybody's going with it, they like it or not. It's like they're trying to assert it for themselves that eventually they will be in this place. My question is, why do you want to be there? It's something that's baffling to me. You know, it, and maybe they have experienced such I don't know, hardship or trauma or such unfulfilled desires or unfulfilled love or whatever, I don't know, in this world, that they just want to kind of go into a state, find some state where they're just kind of blissed out in some type of interconnected non-identity state, and they don't have to deal with disappointment, or I don't know exactly what it is, but I cannot imagine a better state than this world, just a little bit better. You know, just a little bit better. Just a little bit of tweaking, you know, and maybe that's just because I found what I considered to be and lived in what I considered to be my heaven. You know, here on Earth. You know, I was fortunate enough to be able to live there for 27 years, and you know, after the grief, I'm still living in it. I'm still living in this heaven with my wife, with my ghost wife, and I can't imagine anything better than that. You know, there's no state of existence that I can imagine that could lure me out of this place. So I don't know if they have like Jehovah's Witnesses that come around and knock on your door every once in a while and go, "Isn't it about time you moved on?" Slam the door in her face.
Time to move up to the next level.
I'm
And
trying to move on. Yeah,
I don't, yeah, I sound, I feel like by laughing, I don't mean to demean, like you said, demean anybody or anything, but it's ill, to me, it's illogical.
yeah,
And I want to add two things. Anybody who knows me knows that I love the Annie Najee recordings of the Annie passed over and her husband in seance with Leslie Flint, the direct voice medium, met with her for about 15 years, twice a year in seance. And she came through, her voice came through, not through Leslie Flint, but into the room, and everybody could hear her voice. And she, so that's how we get a lot of information, like you were saying, about how it is for people on the other side from people who are there and who have been here and crossed over there. And she said her mother was very religious. Her mother was, I guess, very conservatively religious. And while she was living here, Dinshaw, Annie's husband, tried to get Annie's mother to come to one of these seances so that she could hear her daughter's voice. And that just freaked her out. She didn't want any part of it. And so when in the course of this time, the mother passed over. And so now she's on the other side with Annie. And so Dinshaw would say, "Can you visit with your mother?" And she said, "Yes. But my mother mostly remains with people who are like-minded. They go to church. They're very focused on church and religion. She can see her mother, and she does, but her mother is still kind of entrenched in that kind of thinking. And I guess, comfortable about that. But the other thing that Annie would talk about these levels, so to speak, except now she's on the other side and she's saying, well, what I've heard though is that eventually we move on. Well, I mean, she meant her, with her husband, we move on to other levels until we're one with God. But I don't really know about it because I've just heard about it. So I'm thinking all these rumors are over there too. Although that's unfair of me because maybe there are people who that's what that's what they look forward to.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure all that information exists over there. This is a lot of the astral projectors agree to this. Well, all of the prolific ones really do, and the information from the dead, like you were just talking about, they do. I mean, there's places where people discuss different spiritual perspectives, different concepts of reality. Uh, I forget who it was said that there's still materialists who live in the afterlife who don't believe in the afterlife. So they're trying to figure out what it is that they're experiencing. So that's I think there's infinite room for all perspectives, and not in some type of dismissive way. But to me, that's just they're all real. All of those things are real in the same way that anything else is real, and that is you experience it. You experience the reality of it. And so I think all of those things are available to all those people, regardless of their perspectives and regardless of their whatever their beliefs are, their deep inner nature is. They will gravitate towards those areas and towards those people, and that's fine. I'm perfectly happy letting everybody live however they want to live in what we call the afterlife. I just wish more people were perfectly happy letting everybody live they want to live in the afterlife.
Yes.
that
Yeah.
would be awesome. Uh, so there was another subject. Let's see that it was kind of part of the discussion in yesterday's group, just a little part of it. And that was, by the way, anybody in the group, you can add stuff in chat if you'd like to for us to discuss something or have a question. And that is, the living of your life here while your partner is on the other side, and both interacting with other people who may not share your views, or how to interact in general with people. And I liked what I particularly like your means of doing that, Mary Beth, in that you are unabashedly in a relationship with Paul, and you don't hide that from anybody, and you don't like water that down for anybody. And it's not, you're not confrontational about it, but you have no problem telling the waiter that your ghost husband or your invisible husband is sitting across from you, and you have no problem telling anybody who walks into a situation that, oh no, I'm fine, my invisible husband is with me, I'm good. And so I'm just one of the things I was thinking about, because this did come up, is I know it can be really difficult to be unabashed, because people worry about how that will affect their work life, affect their relationships, their family, that type of thing. But the other thing, and I'm for people doing whatever makes them feel comfortable and behaving however it makes them feel comfortable. But one of the things that I have noticed as a recurring story is that when people step a little bit outside of that and are willing to, I don't know, not really put themselves at risk, because I wouldn't advise doing this when you're in a state where it's a risk to your emotional health and to your psychological well-being. But when you're kind of confident in your relationship with your person and you've got that on an even keel, I think that you could be very surprised at the positive effect of saying these kind of things to people can have on other people, the kind of people it can draw to you. Because in my perspective, we're kind of we're to a large degree creating our own reality here now. It's not as quick and as effective as maybe in the afterlife, but we're doing it here now. And if you want more people in your life who resonate with this, and you kind of want to go down a path of resonating with this, and of this being your structure going forward, it might be wise to be a little brave, or a little more experimental about being more free with this, and telling other people, because I don't think it's long term very healthy to live in fear of what other people might think about you, or how this might affect your life. If living in that type of fear, I don't think it's good from a law of attraction perspective, and I don't think it's good from a health perspective. What do you think, Mary Beth?
Well, no, I totally agree with you. I lived growing up, and in my young and middle adulthood, I worried a lot about what people thought about me. But I've had about a million years of counseling and coaching. And I learned that the most important thing is what I think about me. And that if I, like, if I would tell somebody about Paul, and I would meet with resistance, I would just think to myself, well, that's okay. They can be resist. They can have their own thoughts about it. They can be resistant to it or whatever. It doesn't affect my belief system and what I know to be true for myself. So we can't really, we can never live our lives for other people. That's never advisable. You know what's interesting about that, though? Has nothing to do with the afterlife, but I've thought about this a lot because I spent a lot of years trying not to live my life for other people. and working on that. And what I realize is, as babies, when we're born, we actually sort of have to live our life for other people. They have studies that show that infants very early on learn how to manipulate the adults around them by crying or looking at them, because the baby, the infant, is totally dependent on the other person's attention to live, to survive. And so from the very beginning, we're almost conditioned to have people respond to us in a certain, favorable way so that we won't wither and die. And that's where I believe, I didn't do a study on this or anything, but I really believe that's kind of the root of it. Why people, the idea that we need other people's approval or we want them on board with what we're thinking is not a problem that was particular to me. Many, many people grapple with that. And so when you can move through that though, and really live, because really and truly, when you get down to it, other people are not really, you're not on their radar 24/7. And but you are living with yourself 24/7. And I heard this, I like little mottos and mantras and things. And I heard this one that said, you are the only person who you know for certain will be with you from the day you are born until the day you die. You're going to be with yourself the whole time. So you better, it's helpful for you to support yourself as much as possible. And if I can just speak very quickly to the other thing about, everybody has to do it again, again. Everybody has to do it in their own way and whatever is comfortable, their own timeline or whatever. But I didn't want to deny Paul. And again, if you're not comfortable sharing it, doesn't mean you're denying your partner. I don't want to worry anybody. But for myself, I wanted to be proud of the fact that I had this ongoing relationship with Paul. And what I found was, although I met resistance here and there, what I found was that the vast majority of people, even if they weren't like-minded, were supportive. Because almost everybody, you reach a certain age, and almost everybody has experienced the death of someone they care about deeply. And so then, people would initially say, "Oh, I'm so," and I said, "No, no, no, it's fine. It's fine. He's with me. I have no grief. I know we're together now, and I know we'll be together forever." But what I also found was that then people who I talked to, like the waiter, or one time a guy came to, a maintenance man came to work on my house. And, I was saying, well, I really need this fixed because you live here alone, lady. And I said, well, yes, but my invisible husband, and I went through that whole thing. And it turned out this man's young adult son had died. And he and his wife were still grappling with that. And so we had a really productive talk about it. And he said, "Oh, it was, really great talking it over with you. Thanks so much." So there's opportunity. I'm not out to convince anybody of anything, but there's opportunity to offer, I'll say this sounds like a religious word, but fellowship to other people who might have had a similar kind of experience, even if it's not in the romantic realm. And I found that's the more typical thing. That's the more typical response people have. And they're interested and they're curious and they think, oh, that's kind of different. And so I enjoy sharing it, even if they're not on board with it.
Yeah, I think that does lead, like you were talking about, it doesn't even have to be in particular about an afterlife or even in particular about, romantic relationships. We who have been through this grief of having somebody we love die, uh, have felt like, as you said, we are the people who have fellowship to offer to those others who have go through this kind of experience in a way that a lot of times the people around them can't even understand what they're feeling and what they're going through. And we do have that understanding. So maybe we won't say really stupid shit to them like a lot of people say. So we can offer our companionship and our fellowship uh, in a more respectful and understanding way.
And I've
And
run, oh, excuse me,
no,
William.
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've run into people who say something like, oh, I have run into people who say something like, oh, my husband died, but, he wants me to be happy. He wants me to be with someone else. And I will say to them, well, good for you. That's fine.
Yeah,
Everybody. Everybody everybody is has their own path.
Yeah.
And so even if it's their path is not my path, I can acknowledge it and just say that's cool, whatever, whatever is good for you.
All right. We have the ability to support them whatever path they choose to go down. And I
Right,
think
right.
I think a lot of people, if my time on Reddit is any example, a lot of people are just besieged by the expectations of other people to conform to certain pathways of going through their grief. And if being in this group has taught me anything, it's that nobody goes through grief the same way. I mean,
No,
it's a completely unique experience, and you have, in my opinion, you just have to respect because you don't know what those people have been through in their entire lives. You don't know, their whole psychology. You don't know what they have to do to survive. And the best thing that we can do is just be supportive. Now, if they ask for information or ask for advice, we can certainly offer that. But the way I always do that is, well, this is stuff that I did or that it worked for me, but it may not apply to you. It may not be worthwhile for you on your path to try something like this. But here it is. And they always appreciate that. If somebody not coming from, well, you need to do this and this. I just recently, there was a guy on Reddit who didn't go to therapy. He didn't go to, his wife died and he didn't go to any type of therapy. He was doing all right, but he had a few people in his life who kept insisting that he go to therapy. And I was wondering, why do these people want you to go to therapy if you're doing all right? You're like he said, I'm doing all right, and my perspective, but I said to him, well, it may be that these people had to have therapy themselves to go through something in their life. And they're not responding well to the idea that other people don't need therapy to go through some of these things. It might make them feel less than, or not as psychologically strong as this guy. And it's got, if you're doing well, that's all that matters. All that matters is that you're going down a path that makes you feel well. And so, in other words, you don't know what the whole psychological thing that's going on. Even the people around you who probably mean well, but can say the most hurtful things is you know we have the grace to have been through that and to understand how these things, so we're a little bit more circumspect in the kind of things that we will say to people in that situation. But I does think it prepares us really well to be there for other people. And so I want to, we have a question here about what we were talking about before, how Annie Nanji heard about moving on to other levels. And there's another story about the woman who lived for a long, long time in the afterlife in a cottage, I think out in the forest somewhere. And people kept coming around trying to help her out of that location and move on upwards in the realms. And the question is about are we still subjected to external forces? And so my perspective on that is that I think let's see, I am sure that you can lock yourself away in a private reality and never have to deal with that. Okay, if that's what you want to do. But I think that, like here, I mean, if you're like me or like most people, I think you do like to be around some variance of thought. You don't want to be around a bunch of criminals or something or some evil doers, but you do like to have some variance of thought and ideas and some variance of beliefs. Like I like going on Reddit and talking to people who have different ideas than I do. I'm not trying to convince them anything. I just enjoy those type of conversations. There are people in this group who have different ideas about things, and that's wonderful. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I enjoy talking to them as well. And I think, the more, let's say, broad your ability to interact and appreciate people with different ideas, you have like a larger community in the afterlife that you can interact with. That doesn't mean you have to adopt their views. That doesn't mean that you have to go down their path, and it doesn't mean you have to give them any authority over you. Uh, like I said, if like there was a time after Irene died that these Seventh-day Adventists, why I keep bringing them up, these Seventh-day Adventists came and knocked on my door, and I just let them in and let them talk. I just talked to them. I didn't try to talk them out of anything. I just wanted to hear what they had to say. And it didn't change my views on anything. It didn't, make me want to move on from Irene or move on from my perspective. But they were very nice. They were very nice, and I enjoyed talking to them. And then it came to the time when they were trying to basically convert me, and I said, "Well, you can stop coming by now." And they did. I guess they struck me off their list because I was never visited again by a Seventh Day Adventist.
By the way, William, that woman that you referred to in the Leslie Flint recordings, who said that she was perfectly happy in her cottage, eventually she did move on a bit. But they talked to her again, and she said, "Yeah, I moved on a bit." But what does moving on mean? I mean, and also in the book, one of my favorite books, and everybody forgive me, I know I keep referring to this, but this is one of the most, for me, it was one of the best pieces of information I had about this whole level thing, because I didn't want to move. I didn't want, to me, moving on to a state of bliss where I lose my individuality and Paul loses his individuality and everybody I love is, like one big, that's very attractive to a lot of people, but it was frightening to me. And so in the book, the unobstructed universe, I I get points for saying that, unobstructed universe, um, by Stuart Edward White. His wife, Betty White, not the actress, but his wife Betty was very similar to Esther Hicks of Abraham Hicks fame because she started receiving information when she was alive. And he wrote a book called The Betty Book. He was a writer before. Oh my gosh, this story is so chopped up. Stuart Edward White was a famed writer of. He wrote novels about at the turn of the century. He wrote novels about the westward movement. And then his wife began having these metaphysical experiences where she would be downloading information, so to speak. And he started recording it in the Betty book. And then Betty, his wife, died. And they had made friends with these people, another couple who lived in the eastern part of the U.S. But they had both had prominent careers, and it was a secret that they were metaphysically focused. And that woman was a channel. So after Betty died, Stuart traveled east and stayed with this couple, the friends of theirs, and she channeled Betty to Stuart. And that's what the book, The Unobstructed Universe, is. It's about all of Betty's experiences on the other side. And she says so many wonderful things because they tried to do it. The two husbands tried to do it like a scientific experiment. They tried not to get too mushy gushy with it. They wanted it to be like as clean as possible, according to them. And he would meet with the other woman, we don't really know her name. They gave her a pretend name. I forgot her name. But he would meet with her and she would go into a trance and then Betty would come through. And he said he would record whatever Betty said. And then afterwards they would have a private time together where he could ask Betty intimate things. But the really cool thing that came out of that for me was that he would say, well, will I be able to find, like all the things we want to know? Will I be able to find you? Will I recognize? She said, don't worry, you will recognize me. And she said, in the afterlife, there's solidity, like on earth, but also fluidity. It's a balance between solidity and fluidity so that we can walk down the street or we can just decide to be mentally transported someplace. And that makes sense to me, that the afterlife would be like that. And so she assured him that they would be together. And this is by the turn of the century, I mean 1900. And so, there was no internet, obviously, and everybody used to write letters to him because he was an author and he published these books. People would write him letters and ask him questions. And he had a couple, books after the unobstructed universe that answered these questions. And people would say things like, for example, what if I have, what if in my life I had two husbands who I loved? Which one would I be with in the afterlife? And he said, whichever one you love the most. And he was talking about a conversation he had with a woman who was asking him that question. And she said, I don't know. I love them both. And he said, well, whichever one you love the most. And she said, oh, I know which one. And so the books are lovely. A lot of them are actually online available for free, especially his After the Unobstructed Universe, which is considered a seminal book in afterlife studies. His other books that he had about the correspondence he would have with a lot of his fans of his books. And interestingly enough, they said back in the day that a lot of times people who were authors would have these metaphysical experiences because those were the people who could communicate to the masses through books.
Right.
Because there was no television or internet and travel was not as easy as it is today. So that was kind of interesting. But I recommend that everybody read that book. And a lot of the things that she says in the book are confirmed in other, like some of the things she said are exactly what Annie Nanji said. Two completely different sources, completely different eras, and they're saying the same thing. So I like that a lot. But William, I want to pose something to you. Originally, when we started talking, I was telling you about Matt Frazier, who I like and I believe, and he's really right on it about a lot of things. But I wasn't crazy about that one piece of information. And I can give you another example, John Edwards, who I also like, and I've gone to see this past year on Paul's Angelversary. John Edwards appeared locally, and I got tickets, and we went to John Edwards. I even booked a room in the hotel where he appeared. There were 500 people there. I didn't get a reading, but it was nice to listen to him because I like him and I've read all his books and everything. But he's always said one thing that I don't resonate with at all. And he said, the second year after someone passes is the hardest. And the idea behind that is that, all the support systems kind of go back to their own lives. And, you've had your year of grief and, get on with it kind of deal. And I didn't find that at all. I found that the people who were supportive of me remained supportive of me. And I found that my relationship with Paul grew deeper and stronger. And it was when I connected with you, William, and we started the group. So it was not, the second year was not the way John Edwards described it, but the way I'm sure if I had John Edwards here, he would say, well, maybe not for every single person in the world, Mary Beth. But the way he talks about it is that it's a thing that most people will experience. And I'm thinking, not so much. So I want to ask you, I know that you have some people that even with your authoritarian disdain, you have some people that you admire and you follow and you listen to, but sometimes they say things that you're not in agreement with. And I want to know how you reconcile that kind of.
Well, I reconcile it by realizing they're just people. They're just normal people. Jürgen Zive, and I love Jürgen Zive. I love him, and I look up to him because he has admirable character. He's self-effacing. He's uh, very loving and very kind, and but and very knowledgeable. Obviously, this guy is very knowledgeable, but he doesn't know everything. He's just a person. I don't know everything. I don't know much of anything. Okay, I'm just a person, and
Well, you know
another.
more than most about all of this.
Oh yeah, that's me. But another one that everybody loves that and just irritates the holy crap out of me, and that's what's his name, Silver Birch or whatever
Oh,
the channeled entity,
yes.
White Cloud or whatever his name is. I don't know. And he makes these broad, spiritual pronouncements that supposedly apply to everyone, and that just. So how I deal with it, Mary Beth, is yeah, I've told you is since I believe that reality is infinite, that existence is infinite, that all of those things that they talk about, they're real. You can experience those things, that they're all real. but that's not the end of it. That, it's just, that's not the end of it. That has no bearing on what you as an individual can move yourself into as your afterlife reality and as your afterlife existence. And you can just tell a lot of these guys. I hate using Jurgen Zive as my whipping boy for this, but this guy would talk about how the vast majority of people that he ever saw in all of his afterlife experiences is yeah, astral plane explorations were just regular people living regular lives, doing regular things, doing the things that they love here. That's what he saw. That was I mean, he reported that honestly, that this is what he saw. People still going to jobs, even if they didn't have to. People still going to jobs, people still doing their art, people still eating food, people still playing games and doing their normal social activities and going down to the beach and hiking and swimming and then going hiking and doing things with making new friends there and doing stuff with new friends and doing all this stuff. And then he would come in and characterize all that in this spiritual narrative. And so to me, they're like two completely different things. Is there's what he reports and then there's how he characterizes it. And I think that's true of even of Matt Frazier. And I think Matt Frazier has a uh, probably developed through his long mediumship has a sort of narrative, either at the conscious or subconscious level, of what he believes the afterlife to be like, and that's how it comes through. Those are the sources, or those are the information sources that resonate with Matt. That's the type of information that resonates with Matt. And so he offers that. And so this is what we have to keep in mind. And this is true of both me and Mary Beth as well. And that is uh you you guys, people in the audience here and the people listening, only you know what your heart desires. Only you know what the yearning inside of you is towards. And in my opinion, you're the only one that can figure out or can understand that and let it guide you to your afterlife home. And it may not look much like mine. It may not look much like anybody else's, but don't let anybody talk you out of that. That would be my advice. Don't let any authority figure, me or Mary Beth or whatever, talk you out of what resonates deeply in your heart as that which is, I often characterize it this way, as that which here in this world we think is too good to be true. Just wrap your arms around what's too good to be true in your heart and live that and let that come through and experience that and let it be true. Just, I think that 99% of our difficulty is just not allowing that out because we're afraid of being disappointed. We're afraid of being hurt. We're afraid of other people's, you know, not liking what that is or disagreeing that it's possible or whatever. You don't have to run around and tell other people that, but just, in your private world with you and your partner or with just by yourself, allow those things to be true. Allow yourself to explore what that is down in your heart that you want to be true. To me, it's just very simple. I've already had it. I've already experienced that with my wife here in this world. Something that for 27 years, maybe with a few moments of not so cool, of a little stuff going on. But 27 years of this is too good to be true. Irene and I often said that to each other. That it's crazy that this is just too good. And even if you just experienced a day or a week of that, even if you just experienced a few minutes of that, this is too good to be true, which I know we have all experienced at least a few minutes of that with our partners, right? That to me is what you hold on to. That's the thing that will take you where you want to go, to where that is the place where you live, not the place where you just happen to we're able to visit it here and have a taste of it here, but that's the place where you live in the afterlife.
I go on a lot of grief groups that are like traditional grief groups, and I don't participate in them because they're not really like mine. These people are in agony. And a lot of times, interestingly enough, and this is not judging them, but I'm just saying, in order to escape the agony, a lot of times people will come on and say, and sometimes it's just like for spouses, and so they'll come on and say things like, "This is not an uncommon comment." They'll come on and say, my wife died 6 months ago and I'm in so much agony. Do you guys think it's too early for me to look for someone new? Now, I'm not judging them, but I think it's because they're looking the pain of grief is so I don't know. I don't even have words for it. It was so hideous. And so they're looking for that kind of relief. And other people will offer some people say, oh, I repartnered too fast. I'm not in here to talk about repartnering. I don't even know why I told that story exactly. What were we just talking about, William, that you've experienced it. Yeah. So I don't think it's new news that a lot of married people even have not experienced what we have experienced. And the idea that that it's ahead of us is so exciting. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. So this one woman said in this grief group, she was saying that when people say to her, the thing that drives her crazy, her husband just died. What drives her crazy is when people say to her, you have your memories. At least you have your memories. And she said, my memories, my memories slice me to ribbons. My memories make me want to throw up. I'm so upset. I lost all those beautiful memories. They're all gone. Everything's gone. My husband's gone. I'm in agony. And I don't want to go back to those memories. And I didn't say anything to her, but what I wanted to say to her is, if you can get to the point where reliving the memories is not painful, but triggers the joy and the beauty and the happiness and the exaltation of those memories, then you've got it. Then you're cool. Then you can enjoy this transdimensional relationship. And it's difficult at first because, William, we've talked about this, and Abraham says even that in the beginning, the beautiful memory triggers the missing of them. So you go from a memory, and in like a split second, you're in the agony of, I'll never have that. That's another thing I've lost. I've lost the holidays. I've lost the trips. I've lost the cuddles on the couch. I mean, you name 75 billion things that you've lost because your person is no longer physical. And if you can harvest those memories, when you can get to a point where you can harvest the memories in a way that does not trigger the grief, then you're really golden.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree 100%. That's the quickest way. And when Mary Beth says memories, I want to move a little bit further with that, is that that's your access point to your partner. That is your easiest access point to your partner, not in the past. So you're accessing them in the now by going into these memories. And the better you can do that without pain and with joy and happiness, it's just so wonderful. And it can actually transform by itself pretty much your ongoing life in this world into something really special and really magical, because you can access those anytime. That's something that's under your control. We may not be able to control when we astral project or have, big synchronistic experiences, or not even control really, mediumship. We may not have enough money. They can cancel. It may be a good or a bad reading, but you can always go to a memory. Once you get past that pain, you can always go to a memory and be right with your partner. I mean, you will feel them so close and so full. It can be completely emotionally overwhelming in a good way. That's definitely, I know that's both mine and your experience, Mary Beth, that it can just overwhelm your senses.
Yes,
Uh,
oh, I'm sorry, William.
no, go ahead.
If I just might, you have to let me jump in because I have no memory talking about memories. I have no, my brain is Swiss cheese. But we were just talking about like if you're admiring someone and following someone and reading their books and listening to their recordings as a resource, and then they say something that's off, and it kind of can sort of like unless what William said about just they're just people, and you take from them what you can and just kind of toss away the rest. That's good, but the converse I found is possible. I mean, is helpful rather. So, for example, when you're talking about the memory thing, and what helped me with the memory so much, and I know I've mentioned it before, but it's worth mentioning again because it's gold. It really helped me so much. Was in listening to Annie Nanci recordings, and her husband would lament the fact, oh my, and he's talking to her, by the way. Oh my darling, we can, remember when we used to walk in the gardens and we went to this certain restaurant, and oh, and he would be all like, uh, down in the dumps about it. And she would say, oh, my darling, anything that we enjoyed there, we can recreate here. And so none of those memories are lost. Nothing and no one is ever lost to us. And so anything that you cherish as a memory, you can recreate there. It's not gone. It's not gone at all. And it's so when I realized that nothing that Paul and I shared is gone, and that we can relive anything. And we did a lot of fun things together. We traveled and things like that. We would go to, you know, museums. We love music. I would say I could go to a rubber band museum with Paul and have fun, a paperclip museum. And we liked all those things. And all those things await. First of all, I can enjoy them now because my memories don't hurt me anymore. And I can enjoy them knowing that I can have them when I cross over in a much fuller, richer, complete way. And as a bonus, I can create new memories here with Paul. So
Right.
when you get in that and you really live it, it's, if you don't live it, if you haven't experienced it, it's just words. And it sounds painful to people who haven't experienced it. It sounds like so much Hallmark card baloney, but it's real. And if one person, what I was trying to say is if one person like Annie Nanji can express that, she's the only one I've ever heard who says you can recreate anything on the other side, but that's enough. If one person can do it, I can hang on to that, and then Paul and I can do it too.
Yeah. Something that somebody brought up yesterday in the group was the idea of people wanting you to live a full life, and then saying something like they were equating that to basically repartnering. The idea that you're not going to live a full life if we just go on with this transdimensional relationship. And I just like to say that that's just a crock. That's just a crock. I mean, do you not live a full life unless you experience every possible thing in this world? Of course, that's not true. You don't have to become a drug addict for a while to have a full life. You don't have to climb the corporate ladder to have a full life. You don't have to own a mansion to have a full life. You don't have to have this ocean of friends and family to have a full life. That doesn't even mean anything. It's just a way of putting people down for not doing what they want you to do, for not living the kind of life that they think you ought to be living. And I can tell you right now, uh, my life now in this transdimensional relationship is even fuller than it was while Irene was here. And why is that? Because we can do so much more now. We can do so much more now. We can go do anything. We can experience anything we want. And it's a much more magical type of existence. It's a much more well, I'm not gonna say it's much more magical than there were a lot of times when we were together. It was pretty magical. It was pretty wild. It was great. But I'm saying on a day-to-day basis, this is, for me, and I realize I'm in a privileged position because I'm retired. I don't have to go to work, and I don't have a lot of people jumping down my case about all this. But I did have a bunch of people jumping down my case when I first started publicly talking about this. I had quite a few people jumping down my case. Uh, but it's once you, like Mary Beth said, once you get past the memory problem, the pain of that, once you let yourself kind of settle into this life and once you kind of get a framework for understanding its potential, what you and your partner can do, what what the future holds for you, what you can do even now. Like earlier we were talking about having transdimensional sex. You can do that. That your partner is actually probably for a lot of us more accessible to us now than they were before they died because they're always with us. They're always with us. Uh, and that's a very comforting feeling. Another very comforting feeling is we've been through the worst. We've already been through the worst, and we're on the other side of it. And I don't have to worry about Irene getting sick. I don't have to worry about Irene dying or even worse things happening in our life. I don't have to worry about any of that. And so it's very freeing like that. But it adds this element, this huge element to our lives that other people don't have access to. I mean, they have access to it, but they're not exploring it. They're not involved in it. And we are. We in this group are have access to this and are actively participating in and pursuing a life that, in my opinion, is far richer and far deeper and far more meaningful than what most people live. Even the wealthy people who experience all kinds of stuff, it's far deeper and far wealthier and far more meaningful than that. So, I hardly ever leave my house, or the yard, and every once in a while, family comes over, I go to their house or whatever, and I am so happy and so fulfilled on an ongoing basis because I have knowledge now and understanding now about something that I had virtually no knowledge of and no understanding of before Irene died because I didn't have to. I mean, because she was right there physically around me. I didn't really have to go to anything deeper or anything more meaningful or anything bigger than that. But now that we are there on the other side of that and what this offers, it's unbelievable. I am so happy and so thrilled and so lucky to be in this position now.
Yeah, well, when Paul died, again, I've said this before, I don't think I have any new information. but but way before when Paul died, I listened to Abraham for many years, and then uh, Esther's husband Jerry died, and so there was a lot of talk about what happens when your partner dies. And then Abraham said, uh, "It's so funny because they're talking about she's channeling them, and they're talking about her, and they said that Esther." Grieved for about a year after Jerry died, rather, and but now she has a relationship with Jerry that's far better than even when he was physically focused. And I remember thinking, I don't know, that sounds impossible. That just sounds impossible. But I was such a weak kitten after Paul died. I was just so like physically and emotionally. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like I physically beat up. Like every single part of my hair hurt, my teeth, everything hurt. And I was tired all the time and I could barely get out of bed. And it was just even to function, to do like basic, to take care of. I mean, I forced myself to do it, but it was amazing to me how um, systemic and overwhelming the grief experience was. Uh, Visceral, I guess is the better word. But anyways, but because I didn't know anything about the afterlife except, they would say there is no death, but they don't really talk a whole heck of a lot about what the afterlife is like. And I just clung on to them and it clung on to that. And I remember thinking, well, I don't know that I could do that. I don't know that I could ever feel. I remember telling my kids, I'll never have a moment as happy as when I was with Paul. But they said exactly what you just said, William. They said that when Esther and Jerry were physically focused as humans, Sometimes he would be off doing something and she'd be off doing something else. And now there's no physical barrier between them. They can be together. They're only a thought away. They can be together all the time. And they can be each doing their own thing, but all you have to do is think of them and they're right there. So that makes sense to me too. And I remember thinking, well, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I can have a relationship with Paul that's better than when he was here, but I'm going to try. And I set my sights on doing anything and everything I could do to feel better. That didn't mean the grief went away, or some people have said to me, well, you can't push down the grief or deny it. I thought, deny it. It just overwhelmed me. I don't know if maybe some people are stronger than I and they could push that down or deny it, but it was, all encompassing the grief. I mean, it knocked me flat. Scott Milligan, the medium who is friends with Sandra Champlain, who a lot of us like, he says when his father died, grief has its way with us. I felt like they have when a dog gets like another animal in its mouth. That's the way I felt. Like grief had its way with me. So there was nothing about ignoring it or anything like that. But I tried to focus on feeling better, even with the grief with me. And I did every single thing in my power to focus on feeling better. And little by little by little by little, it did. And it took me about 18 months. And I remember one day thinking, I don't feel it at all. And I did feel that the relationship with Paul was even deeper and more meaningful, and in many, many ways better than when he was physically focused.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it was uh, like during our lives together here, like Irene and my life, even though we had like a fairy tale little paradise life most of the time, and it was so beautiful and magical. Here's the thing: is it was all structured and narrowed by the limitations of this world. In other words, we aged. We would get sick. There would be bills to pay, children to take care of. Um, the being able to afford a place to live, pay the bills, pay your taxes. Uh, so like either one or the other or both of us had to work, and so there was all of this, and there's of course all of the social and other stuff that goes on in this world that is like it's like all these walls and all these confinements, of narrowing in our own physical health. Of course, was a big one. Narrowing in of the room we had to express our love for each other. Let's put it that way. To do things together and to go places or to spend time together. It was narrowed by all of these things, or how much attention we actually had to give each other because of all these other things. And what I have found is that when we talk about the deepening of it, is because her death like opened this doorway beyond all of that, beyond all of the limitation, beyond all of the structures that confined us and limited what we could do and limited even our time together, just limited our time together, our ability to be near each other, to talk to each other. Like now, Irene and I can talk to each other all day, and we can interact all day, and we can. And when I say that, I know you got, like people have jobs, but it's like before you had a job, and you might be able to talk to your partner, giving them a phone call, or these days, like maybe taking a few minutes to send a text. Well, now it's like you don't even have to do those things. You don't have to make a phone call. You don't even have to stop what you're doing. You can just turn your thoughts there and be with them. You can just access the memory and be with them. You can it's a so the doorway, and the more you explore that doorway, it's like it gives you the opportunity to be able to express and receive this love with your partner that is unbound by all of these things. And that to me is just the beautiful aspect of this. One of the most beautiful aspects of it is it's just going to get more and more that way. The more and the more at some point I'm going to die and we're going to be there and it's just going to be unbound. That's like, and you imagine being able to go on, your honeymoon and you don't have to worry about work. You don't have to worry about getting tired. You don't have to worry about what's for dinner. We'll just mentally create whatever we want for dinner. We don't have to worry about when does this happen? When do the kids have to be in school? When is so and so coming? Blah, blah, blah. You don't have to worry about any of that. And to me, that's, oh God, that is so beautiful. So we do have a comment here I wanted to address about the afterlife being a like a spectrum, and that anybody who carves out one particular structure is not universal truth, but it's just something that we can either avail ourselves of or move into or not. And I think that that's exactly right. There's I believe countless structures that we can. It just depends on us. And here's when I say this is that you are the author of your life, and so you are the author of your existence. You and your partners could do this any way you want to do it. And if somebody in the afterlife or in this world brings something to your table to consider or read or look at, or it just intrudes or whatever, you have full authority to say, "Ah, that sounds interesting," or "That sounds fun. Let's do that," or let's add that to us and to our afterlife. Or you can say, "No, thanks." You just nope, not part of my world. And you don't have to figure out how all that works. You don't have to figure out, the value of that information coming from, of where it's coming from. Uh, if you have like I know Mary Beth likes Abraham, and there are sources like we've already talked about this, like Jurgen or Craig Hogan, who I enjoy as sources, but that doesn't make me their servant. That doesn't make me their cult member. Is if any of them say something we don't like or don't want to be a part of, just say no thanks. It's a la carte. You get to decide what works for you in your relationship with your partner, what you want to have a part of it. And that brings up, let me continue with this just for a second, Mary Beth, something I read on Reddit, where this guy was talking about he took his desire to live in a mansion and eat lobster in the afterlife. He said that to somebody in, I believe it was an NDE group or a spiritual group, and they just jumped all over his case about being non-spiritual, materialistic, and egotistical, and greedy, and blah blah blah. And so I don't want to step on anybody's spiritual toes here or invade their thing, but you know, I have a whole Pinterest of things I want in my afterlife with Irene that we want, that we have selected. And yeah, that does include rather palatial castle. That does include some beachfront property. That does include a mountain lodge. It does include some really cool looking cars and motorcycles. It includes a lot of really great food. And here's the thing is that none of that and it doesn't even matter if it was. It doesn't even matter if I wanted all that to show off to other people how wealthy I was in the afterlife, whatever that could possibly mean. It doesn't matter. That's fine. Do that. Do you. Okay. In my view, there's no law against that. There's no rule against that. It doesn't represent a flawed character or an unspiritual person. If you have desires like that you want to experience in the afterlife, and embrace it. If that's coming from your heart and you want, it's like this guy explained this. He said, and this for me too, which just doesn't make me a spiritually better person. It's just I don't want those things to show off to other people. I want them because they're beautiful, because they're tasty, because they'd make my wife happy to look at them. It would please me to walk around in a great big space like a palatial mansion and just look at these things, the marble vases and the beautiful colorful tropical plants and beautiful paintings, and to be able to walk out of our bedroom on the beach floor and walk out on the beach, a private beach, and just walk out there and enjoy the sun and the waves and play there. And if I want to get on a jet ski and take it out to my anchored yacht, my what would be here like $1 million yacht out there in the ocean, and we go lounge around or speed around in that for a little while. It's not hurting anybody. There's not a resource problem in the afterlife. You're not taking food out of anybody's mouth. It's an infinite thing. just enjoy it. That's what do you think about that, Mary Beth?
I want to see you on a jet ski. That's what I'm thinking of. And I think you watched a lot of episodes of My Lottery Dream Home. That's what but I was going to say that. I was going to say, even here, that's what Abraham says. In other words, Abraham says, you can have whatever you want. What you want does not detract from other people, what other people it's they would say it's a false premise that if you have a lot of stuff that you're somehow depriving other people of a lot of stuff. And in fact, in my experience, when I've been lucky enough to have, material things around me it makes me feel happier and more generous to others. So yeah, I really like Abraham a lot because they don't tie into the spiritual notions about, we're put on earth here to devote our life to other people. They say if you want to do that, great. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. If you want a mansion, if you want a sports car, if you want whatever, it's fine. It doesn't take away from what anybody else can create for themselves. And so,
Right.
yeah, I think all of that is really great. I want to get back to one little piece from we were talking about before about how the transdimensional relationship can be even better and richer than the totally physical relationship on this side of things. And people, whenever I say that to people, people often say to me, it's not the same. I can't hear him in my ear. It's not the same. I can't hug him the same way I can pretend, but it's not the same. It's not, you don't understand. I said, oh, I understand. Of course I understand. It's not the same, but it's better for the reasons that you talked about, that it's available to us whenever. And plus, we have the anticipation of looking forward to what I call our great grand romantic reunions, which includes all of it. The deep, now that we have both, we've had the physical and now the transdimensional feeling, the deeper. Abraham says that the period of grief is when it's a period of adjustment during which time, and if this doesn't resonate with you, then toss it out. But it made sense to me that it's a period of transition. Grief is during which time we learn to we learn to stop interpreting our loved ones with our ordinary human senses, sight, sound, touch, all that, and begin to interpret them with our deeper and more meaningful inner senses.
Right.
And that's what happened to that is true for me. That's true for me. And yet people say, no, but yeah, sounds great. But I want to make love to him. I want to hold him. I want to feel him and I get that. I get that. But the thing is that when you focus on that being gone, that part being gone, then it's just, more misery. But if you focus on what you have and understand that to be even more interesting in some ways and more precious, and that we have everything to look forward to after we pass. Everything, all the complete enchilada, the whole thing, the full Monty on the other side. Then I think anticipation for me is a big deal because and I experienced that a lot in my relationship with Paul because we had a long distance relationship for many years before I went to move to be with him because my kids were still growing up. He and I were the same age, but he and his ex-wife had had their kids at normal ages. I was, practically a senior citizen by the time I had my son. So my kids were still younger and, I wanted to be present and be their mother and couldn't move to be with Paul. But we did manage to see each other very frequently, but still we had long stretches, like say 6 weeks of not seeing each other. And we would talk and text and all that every day, more email back then than texting. But I had in the long distance relationship, I had that sense of having him in my life, but not physically in front of me. So I think that helped a little bit with my adjustment, rather than if he were present and available to me uh, completely all those years. But anyway, so I do know, I do recognize it's not exactly the same thing. It's not.
Yeah. And that brings us to another comment here about this person is saying talking to their partner all day, but getting no response makes them feel like they're talking to thin air. And I'll just say this from my own perspective, and that's I would say probably about 80 to 90% of the time when I'm talking to Irene, it feels like I'm just talking to thin air. I say that's just, that's just, I won't say it exactly feels that way because I have like this, because of the time that I have spent going down this path and allowing it to seep into me over time, this recognition that she's with me because of the, well, for one thing, it's the signs that she is giving me and it's the validations that she's giving me and the interaction, which doesn't happen every, not every single day. Uh, the psychological me accessing the memories and me thinking of her and like the affirmations and the psychological conditioning for myself that I have done over the years, I do have a sense of her always being with me. It's a very deep and satisfying sense of Irene being with me all the time. That's part things that have happened, and it's also a large part of me working on myself to condition myself to feel that way. uh, so a lot of the time, majority of the time, yeah, I'm walking around talking to Irene. I'm not getting responses from her. I'm not getting like, any type of words or anything from her. And a lot of times I'm not getting any feeling. This is just me carrying on as if she's right there. I know she can hear what I'm saying. I know that, if she could just respond to me like with words or with some type of imposed mental image or sensation or whatever, she would. But they don't call it the veil for no reason. I mean, there's this veil. Okay. And so it's not that easy for them to interact with us here. And uh, so I would say that the thing is that over time, uh, it doesn't really matter to me whether I get a response from Irene or not about a lot of stuff because I mean a lot of times it's just me sort of having funny things to say about the course of the day, comments about, here, get you some of this food. I'm making us some whatever. Be sure and get some of it. Uh, if somebody brings something over to eat, I'll take a bite and I'll tell her, oh, this is great. Get some of this. Or we watch it on TV and I'll just make a remark or whatever. And I understand that it's not like it, like Mary Beth was just saying, it's not like it was where she would have her smart ass thing to say about whatever. and, or she would respond with an I love you too, or whatever. And I could hear it, at the time of her saying it. Uh, but that's just, it's also like in a lot of ways a long distance relationship, but it's also part of the thing about we weren't together 24 hours a day. And it's just accepting, like Mary Beth was saying, is like, it's like accepting that there's not that type of ongoing interactive communication and ongoing interactive experience. It's just accepting that and not fighting against it. It's like accepting, okay, that's a part of this relationship now. Like if your partner moves off somewhere to do some job for a period of time, you just kind of have to accept that that's part of the relationship. That's how it's, what the situation you're involved in now. And it doesn't mean it's over and it doesn't mean you don't love each other anymore. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't want to be right there with you or interact with you and to support you. It's just the nature of the situation. And we can be angry about that, which all this is fine. There's no law against any of this. It's not going to detract from what's going to come. You can be angry at that. You can lament that. You can focus on that, or you can, or maybe even also, you can understand that there's a reason for this. There's a reason for this experience, and it's providing us an opportunity to show something. For me, it's providing multiple opportunities, but one of them is to show Irene that it doesn't matter if she can interact with me or not. It doesn't matter if um uh if experiences are difficult to come by. It doesn't matter if I'm in pain here. It doesn't. I love her, and I am going to go to the ends of creation to be with her again. And I'm going to validate that she's here with me, even if she can't say, I'm here with you, or even if she can't say, I love you too. I'm going to validate that by continuing to talk to her, by continuing to do what I can to interact with her. And the reason I say that that's an important opportunity is that there are difficulties that we go through in our lives with our partners that serve a purpose. They serve a purpose, and it kind of reveals this relationship in a way that can't be revealed any other way. And it allows each other to see something about this person that they love that they wouldn't be able to see any other way. And when I'm like in the beginning, when I am in raw pain and just basically working off of faith, just absolute faith, because there's no way I can see anything getting any better. I can't see anything ever getting any better. There's no way it can get better. Is just to operate on faith and not turn away from her, and as if I don't absolutely need her. I'm just kind of rambling, but it's as if I don't absolutely need her, you know, in my life. I had to have her in my life. I have to have her in my life. And so I know this can be a difficult, kind of a difficult, I don't really even know if I know what I'm trying to say here, but it's, uh, it's demonstrative in a way that can't be accessed any other way of showing our commitment to our partners. And that's one of the things I am so appreciative about this, because Irene used to ask me several times during the course of our lives here together, is why do you love me so much? Why are you still with me? And like she doubted that, I would be that she would be my first choice, or that, that I loved her that much or whatever. And I get to show that to her now. And it can't be shown except through the difficulty of this situation. I can't show that to her. We can't write this great love story. There's something very poignant and beautiful about it when I walk around this house and I am talking to Irene, even though I'm not getting an answer from her, even though I'm not getting direct communication. She gets to see me do that. She gets to see how important it is to me. I'm getting it from her now to carry on like she's still here. You could take it, Mary Beth.
Yeah, you said something important, William, that this experience of having them pass physically, that and it's not just, for you or me, it's for everybody. I know a lot of people are resonating with this, that it really exposed the depth of the love that we have for them, and all the for me, all the qualities that Paul has that I love so much, they became even more important to me. But also, and I think you would agree with this, William, also, I learned a lot about myself. Like I'm proud of myself that I soldiered through, the pain and with an effort to, Abraham would say, the better you can feel, the easier it is to feel your loved one with you, because they feel wonderful. And I know there's some people disagree with that, and because they've gotten readings and things that says that the other person is grieving, as with them, and that's fine too. All these different scenarios are all perfectly fine. But for me, I wanted to feel better. I'm a naturally obnoxiously ebullient person, and feeling good was important to me. And when I found from Abraham that was my path for me, that I could follow and get closer to Paul, because if I felt better, I could better sense him with me. I was on a mission. I was hell bent. And I am proud of me, and I'm proud for all of us who have these transdimensional relationships, to remain loyal and in love with this person who means so much to us in a society, not so much me because I'm old, but in a society that urges us to move on with other people. And that's fine if you want to do that. There's been people in our group who started out thinking this would be it and they found someone else, and that's perfectly, perfectly okay. It's not a bad thing. It's just a different choice. But I do think it takes a certain amount of courage and a certain amount of, I don't know, like I'll give you an example. I'll give you just a regular old example. Every single night at night, religiously, not that I'm religious, but I watch Jeopardy. Paul and I always watch Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. And a lot of time, this is just a little example. A lot of times, I keep track of how many answers I get. I can watch a whole Jeopardy show and get one answer out of the whole entire show, you know. So they'll if you watch Jeopardy, they'll say this city has the largest population in the United States, and I'll say something like Chicago, and then the answer is New York, and they come back, the answer is New York, and I'll say, oh yeah, that's what I meant, New York, and then Paul and I look over at this blank space next to me, and just laugh because I know Paul would laugh his head off at that, and so it's like we have this cozy couch time, even though he's invisible and I can't see him. I know he's there, and I know he would. I know because we had so many of those times in when he was physically focused. I know how he would respond and react, and so it makes things fun. And it's a time, it's an hour I look forward to at the end of the day, every day, or I'll say, like, there'll be a Wheel of Fortune. If any of you watch it, there'll be a Wheel of Fortune puzzle up there, and that you have to turn letters to see what the puzzle says, and it'll be every single thing except one letter is turned. It's all revealed except one letter, and the contestant still can't get it. And I'm like, oh my God, does that person not, what is the matter with them? Are they like and Paul will we just laugh our heads off. And it's just me and him, and it doesn't matter. I'm not hurting anyone's feelings about it, but it's just something fun that we did when he was here. And now we can continue to do. And I'm happy and proud to acknowledge his presence, even though I can't see him or feel him or hear him. I've never heard Paul in my ear. I've never seen him. I mean, a lot of people, even in our group, have seen their partners, or they've heard things in there. That's never happened. None of that's ever happened to me, ever, never, not once. So
Right.
even though I can't interpret him in the easy way, I know he's there, and it makes me feel like being a good wife, that I'm not ignoring him, that I'm acknowledging him and loving him like crazy.
See, and that's I'm so glad you said that because I was just thinking that as well. And that's if you stop thinking about it in terms of what you're not getting, but think about it in terms of what you're giving them,
Mm.
and so what you just had a great expression about, a great example of that. And it's what Irene and I do all the time as well. It's not like I'm getting responses from her. It's not I don't do it to get a response from her. I do it to show her I'm thinking of her.
Yes.
I do it to show her that she is still the biggest part of my life, And if you don't think your partner's over there going, look, she's still talking to me, you know, and Irene isn't going, look, the rest of y'all's people may have forgotten you exist, but my husband is still talking to me every day, even though he can't hear me, even though he can't see me. He's still talking to me every day. I still matter to him. He still loves me, and that's to me. That's just it's so important to me that I show her that I still love her, that I still think of her constantly, that she is still central in my life, whether I can hear her or not, whether I can get experiences or not, whether it doesn't matter to me. Uh, I know what's to come because all the information agrees what is to come. Okay. And whether or not Irene can get through to me, whether or not I have dreams of her, of course, I always try, but whether or not I can have dreams of her or astral experiences of her, whether or not she puts the flour in the coffee, whether or not uh, she can manifest physically, that would be awesome, wouldn't it? Whether or not she can manifest physically doesn't matter to me. Okay, of course I would love those things, but it doesn't matter to me. It's not about I don't know if I can even say it.
We'll wait.
It's it's not about what she can give me. It's about what I can give her. Okay. That's what it's all about for me.
Yes. Yes.
And once you understand, so that's my role in this part of our love story. It's to show her that she's loved more than anything else.
Yes.
And it's my honor to be that guy. I
Yes.
get to be that guy. And we all get to be that person, no
Yes.
matter how tough it is, no matter how unrewarding it may seem at times, no matter how much we go through here. Oh my God, we're like one of the main protagonists in a Jane Austen movie.
I still say to myself, when I was in high school, it's like, wow, the Paul Mank asked me on a date when we were 17. The, and I never stopped loving Paul. For those of you who know my story, we went out a little bit in high school. It was really only a handful of months, but I was totally smitten. And Paul and I had a lovely teenage romance. But on our very first date, he had said to me, I really like you and I want to go steady, which meant we exchanged high school rings. And he said, and if you want to go steady, I'll remain faithful to you, but I'm only 17. And I'm expecting to go away to college, which is something no one did in our little blue collar town. I'm going to go away to college and I want to date a lot of people before I settle down. So I don't want you to count on me. And I said, okay. And I proceeded to fall madly in love with him. We had a beautiful time together. We never had one moment of trouble, ever, never an argument, never, everything was just bliss. And then one day, he walked me home from school and all he did was he held out his hand and he opened his hand. And my high school ring was in his hand, meaning this is it, you know? And, and I always felt I ran to my front. I cried, "Ah!" and then I ran and he left the house and he walked home. And I ran to my front window and I saw him walking out of my life down the street. And I remember thinking, if you love somebody unconditionally, you want for them what they want for themselves. And so if Paul wants to date other girls, and he told me on date one, he didn't trick me. He was honest with me, and I agreed to it. Then I can't hold that against him. He was honest with me. And a couple times in our lives after that, because we lived in the same neighborhood, and a couple times after that, after we graduated from high school, I would see him here and there. My heart always leapt. It always leapt. And he told me many years later, because we reunited for real 35 years later, and he said, I thought you had a different boyfriend. And I did have a different boyfriend, but I would have dropped him as like a hot potato. I would have dropped, well, yeah, really. And and I said to Paul when we finally got together, this is just a funny story that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I said to him, um, didn't you have a good time when we were together in high school? He said, oh yeah, it was beautiful, it was wonderful. And I said, but then you left and you want to date other girls. And he never found anything as good as what we had, P.S. But he said to me, I know, I was a dumbass. But when we got married, or when we were together before we got married, we were together about a total of 10 years. And, we had like a couple little jagged moments, but nothing, like nothing. We just got along so easily together and we just laughed our heads off and we just enjoyed each other immensely. And that whole thing about you have to work on your relationship, it didn't apply to us. We just were, it was effortless. And right, I know I've said this before, but it's such a beautiful moment. Right before he died, the day, not the moment before he died, but the day before he died, he said to me, I think this whole thing has brought us even closer together. And I agree. His illness brought us close. His terminal cancer brought us closer together. And then his death even more so. And now even more so.
Yep.
10 years later, 10 years later. And, and even now I say to myself, oh my God, Paul Mank, the Paul Mank. I'm married to the, I can't even believe it myself. I'm married to the Paul Mank. How did that happen? How did the gods shine upon me to bring me the person I love more than anybody in the universe? I'm so, 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 so fortunate to be in this position to do what you're talking about, William, to be able to show Paul my undying devotion and love and anything you want, my darling.
Yeah, that's when you start when you're able to think about it like that and understand the value that gives our relationship. It's really amazing. It's really unique and it's special beyond words. It's giving us both, giving both Irene and me and you and Paul the opportunity to experience the full depth and the full meaning and the full value of this relationship and just how deep the love goes and what it means. And it's like other people can't see that. Other people who don't have this experience can't possibly see those things. They can't possibly have that. And that's why and I know that when you're first fresh into this is can be a very, I don't know, off-putting kind of notion, but I just feel so lucky. I am so lucky. I'm beyond gratitude for having all of this happen. And if I could change it now to where we both died at the same time, I would not do it. I would not do that. I wouldn't trade this experience for anything. It's too valuable. It's too meaningful. It's too deep. And it's going to it's going to add just like this infinite depth to our eternal life together in the afterlife, where Irene and I get to look at each other with the full knowledge of what we've been through, with the full knowledge of what each other has done for each other, of how much we mean to each other. And it's like it's not like we didn't understand some of that together. When we were together here, I was I was going through some old stuff. I was cleaning up my house, my room, and I was going through some old letters that we had written back and forth to each other, and I ran across a couple. Like I said, ours was not like that. Not always that that uh, fairy tale, easy peasy relationship. We did go through some pretty difficult times. I read this one letter I wrote to her. It was 3 pages. And I was cringing. I was going, oh my God, you had no idea who this woman was when you wrote this. You had no idea. I was like, hey, sorry about that, babe. But it's like, yeah, and I just, you know, and of course, not everything. We had so much time and of really beautiful, amazing, magical time together, and that, but it's like there were times when I just I had no comprehension of who this woman really was to me. I had no comprehension of how much she was to me, or she still is to me. And I'm so grateful to have had all of that cleared away. It's like all of the miscommunication or all of the not knowing or all of the whatever you want to call it about our relationship is gone now. And it's just like 100%, you know, in union, uh, full knowledge of each other, full understanding and acceptance, and this full, really intimate, really beautiful love that is it's intimate, it's romantic, it's friendship, it's pals, it's ride or die type stuff, and just fun and exciting and thrilling to be with this person who you understand this way. It's so revelatory. It's like nothing else. It's like nothing else. Nothing else even comes close to it, in my opinion. And
Well,
it's
may I add something?
oh, absolutely, yeah.
I want to say, Paul and I got along easily, just our personalities. He was the easiest person in the world to get along with. And we had, we just had a lot of laughs and it was, and a lot of romance, and it was very romantic. It was all lovely. But our relationship was not without problems, but the problem was not between Paul and me. The problem was that, I told you I was on Long Island and my kids were younger than Paul's kids. His kids were already up and out of the house, so they were young adults, and my kids were still going to school, still and anyway. So what happened with me was that I was a freelance writer and the education writer, and it was at the time when the economy collapsed and the everything in educational writing was going digital. And I worked for very big, as a freelancer, I was very fortunate in that as well. I worked for very large companies like Scholastic, for they had a whole division, they called it Scholastic Teaching Resources. And work just flowed to me. I had plenty of work, I made plenty of money, and which, eventually allowed my husband and I to split and have these two houses across the street from each other. But, um, but what happened was, eventually all of that went away. The economy collapsed. The print industry went digital. I went from making a lot of money, over six figures, to making absolutely zero. I took two separate jobs. I was laid off from both of them. I lost my house to foreclosure. I went bankrupt. And I, Paul finally said to my sister, said, "You better leave your house or you're going to come home someday and find your furniture on the lawn." And my son had just turned 21. He wasn't fully cooked. He couldn't go out and buy a house and have a family or anything. But his dad was right across the street. And Paul said, "Why don't you come and live with me?" Now, Paul was still working at the time. And so I really, much as I love Paul, I was grieving the fact that I, had lost my ability to make a living, and the way I had been, and that I had to leave my kids. And even though they weren't little kids, and when I moved to Michigan, it was heartbreaking to me because I would see pictures on Facebook of, my kids and their dad and his big family and everything. They'd all be having Thanksgiving dinner together and I wouldn't be there. And I was sad. And it's weird to me now that I was sad because Paul was right there, you know, but I had this sadness. And then when Paul became ill, I talked to my daughter on the phone. I don't know if I told you guys this already, may have. And I said to her, "Francesca, I worried so much about you guys, you and James, her brother. And I didn't pay full attention to Paul. And now that he's been diagnosed with this cancer, my full attention is on him. I mean, I'm not, like, I'm laser focused on him and our relationship." And she said, my daughter said, "Mom, when a crisis comes into your life, your true priorities come to the fore." And that was true. That was true for me and Paul. And when Paul said that to me at the end of his life, when he said this whole thing brought us even closer together, I said yes, because finally I was 100% focused on you. Finally, I became the wife that you deserved. Now, we didn't have, like I said, we didn't argue or anything, but I was always like, my brain and my focus was always worried about the kids, you know, back home. And finally, what his cancer did was it allowed me to really give my full heart and soul and attention to him, and even more so now that he passed.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about is unless you go through those kind of things, it's too easy. It's not really taking your partner for granted, but you take them for granted in ways you can't really even comprehend
Yes,
until something like that happens. And
you're
and
not
then
aware of it.
yeah, you're not even aware of it. And that's I mean, I knew Irene was the most important thing in my life, but I didn't always act like it. I mean, I didn't always act like it, and I uh, I had no idea how important she was until she's gone, and then I'm empty. I'm completely empty, and nothing has any happiness or joy. None of the little things that I did, any art or any writing or listening to music or watching TV or whatever, none of all of those were just pain. That all those things were just painful to. I couldn't even go online and argue. One of my favorite pastimes was going online and arguing with people. And
Yes.
it's like I mean, I was gone offline for it was about a year until I actually started going back into the grief groups and the spiritual groups. I was offline for about a year because I it was all meaningless and empty to me. And I was in such pain for those first 4.5, 5 months. Everything hurt. Everything I did hurt, and everything just reminded me of what I'd lost. And you can't. There's just no way to know it. I mean, I don't care how much, and I did try. I tried so hard during the course of our life to never take her for granted. I tried so hard my whole life to show her that I love her, and to show her that how much she means to me. There's no way for me to actually do that because I didn't know. I had no idea that she's my life. She's not a part of my life. She's not the most important part of my life. She's my life, and there's no way for me to know that until there was no way for you to know it until he got sick, until Paul got sick. There was no way for me to know it. And even Irene getting sick and me doing absolutely everything I could, you know, to take care of her, to make sure she had everything she wanted. Uh, if we're, I remember sitting in watching some TV with my son and his wife, and Irene just casually mentions, "Oh man, some candy would be good right about now." And I would jump up, I'd go get my wallet. I mean, right then, I'd jump up, I'd go get my wallet and the keys, and then walk in, and I'd say, "What do you want? What are all the different candies that you want?" And she said, "Well, I'd like this and I'd like that." And then I'd turn, to my son and his wife and say, "Do y'all want anything?" And my son looked at me and said, "Dad, you're making me look bad." He said, "Tone it down, man. Uh, my wife is going to be expecting this of me now." But even then, even though, taking her to the cancer clinic and sitting with her and doing all that, none of that prepared me for the absolute emptiness that I felt when she died, and just having that stark revelation that she's everything to me. She's everything. And that's why I say I know this could be hard to comprehend, but I'm glad it's worth it. It's worth it 1,000 times over to come here and get that, you know, out of this life. And I know for a lot of people, and yeah, I also have the benefit that I had prior relationships before Irene. I had a couple of marriages.
Me
Yeah,
too. Too.
yeah, right. You too. And maybe took somebody else out on a date once or twice. I don't know. Uh, but when I met Irene and we had that life together, and of course I've got family and friends who have been married and are still married, and I realized just how special and unique that relationship was. And I don't know that people who like get married to their first love and then that first love dies, I don't know if they have the experience to realize that you're if it was a really good thing and you were really in love and it was really a deep love, is that's not something you find all the time. That's something that's very, very rare in this world, is to find this type of love. And maybe they don't have the experience. They think, well, I'll go out and maybe I can go out and replicate this. And I'm thinking that's not likely to happen. That's Irene had two marriages, and she had I don't know how many boyfriends before we met. It was a lot. Ah, and she was still, when we met, she had written down it was time for she wanted to meet her man, the guy, because none of the other ones were it. None of the other ones were it. None of them satisfied her that way. None of them gave her what she was looking for. And so I know that it's to have been in this relationship with Irene is to me the pinnacle of human experience. It's just the
Yes.
pinnacle, you know. It's just, and if you are lucky enough to have to spend any amount of time in such a relationship, it is so special and so unique and so rare. And this is why, you know, I realize everybody has to go down their own route and has to, if they need to repartner, that's fine. If they want to repartner, that's fine. Uh, but for me, it's like I think another one of our group members was talking about this late in the conversation yesterday, and that is, if I did not believe in the afterlife, and I did not believe, I would still never repartner
Yes.
because I would not spoil this beautiful, amazing relationship and memory for anything. I wouldn't do it.
Yes. I always think that when I die, if there's nothing, it's not like I would ever say, oh man, I spent all those years and I could have been dating some. Yeah, no, I have what I want. I have what I want.
Right.
And
Uh,
it's so exhilarating. And once you dive into, the resources available about the afterlife, I don't know how anyone could deny it, that it exists, because
yeah.
it's overwhelming. There's an ocean, as they say, an ocean of evidence that it exists. So
Yeah.
I'm going with that, and I would rather live my life from now until the day I die, devoting my heart to Paul. That makes me happy. And so that's the happiest way I can live out the rest of this human life. And I do believe with my whole heart and soul that I will close my eyes here and open my eyes and be in Paul's arms. I really, 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 a billion. Well, it's not even a belief, it's a knowing. It's a knowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's something I absolutely know too. Somebody
Yeah.
asked me that, you know, on Reddit the other day. How much do you believe there's an afterlife, or how certain are you of it? I said, 100%. I'm 100% certain of it. And so that knowledge is really wonderful. You know, but what I was going to say about what we were just talking about whether or not there's an afterlife, it does it, you know, that wouldn't change the trajectory of what I'm doing one bit. Is uh, even if all I had was two or three memories of Irene and of these very special, intimate, beautiful times we had together, that would be enough. That would be enough, and I would go. And I honestly think this, guys, is that I've achieved the most you can get out of this life. I've achieved it
Yes.
because I have found my soulmate. I have found the person who loves me and who I love infinitely, who I want to be with forever. And there's nothing I could get out of this life that matches, that even comes close to that. You know, to me, it's the crowning achievement, and it makes me very satisfied with life, very calm. I'm completely without angst or worry, no fear of death, no fear or what any type of uh, like I have health issues. I don't talk about them, but I have health issues. I'm legally blind, which means that I can't do the work I used to do because of my poor eyesight. I have other things. I don't care. It doesn't make me any difference. I'll go through whatever I have to go through in this world because at any time I can access Irene, and even if there's no afterlife, I can access those memories, and it's just the most beautiful thing ever. It's the most beautiful thing I could ever have, you know, to live out the rest of my life satisfied, happy, and completely ready for what comes next.
If those of us who have found this, I think we're the most fortunate people I'm in the universe, really, because we've
Yeah,
had this and we've had this experience, which, as you said, you used to say in the beginning, the love exploded, and then you switched to saying it exposed the depth of the love.
yeah,
It exposes that. And so we get to live that. And it's an honor. And I think it's an honor and a privilege. And when you begin thinking of it that way, instead of, oh my God, how did this horrible thing happen? When you begin to realize it's an honor and a privilege to be in our position, then everything shifts.
yep, that's right. That's right. Well, okay. Believe we've run the 2 hours we normally like to do. I would like to thank everybody for coming and for your comments. And Mary Beth, is always great to talk to you, and we'll see you guys next time. I'm going
Hey,
to
you
end.
too, William. Love you all. Bye. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to end this recording.